Hello, and welcome to Inventors Helping Inventors. I'm your host, Alan Beckley, inventor of the Wonder Wallet. If you're an inventor searching for proven ways to make money with your invention, if you dream to see your product selling in stores everywhere, you've come to the right place. There's no better place to get help than from experts, inventors who've already achieved success. Every week, I interview successful inventors, asking them the questions you want to know. Tune in to learn from the experts so you can get your invention out of the tank and into the bank.
Without a human pilot on board a drone, by default, to look out the window, so to speak, and see icing form, you can't fly into forecasted icing conditions. And the reason why is some aircraft, like if you go through an airport or you take a commercial flight, you'll see planes often get sprayed with one or two different chemicals before they take off. This is a safety precaution, and it's being over safe when it comes to the risks around icing formation, especially on takeoff.
If you've listened to this podcast for a while, you've heard me talking about the Inventors Bootcamp, right? Over the last 3 years, hundreds of inventors have joined us in the Inventors Bootcamp, and we have lots of exciting success stories from our students. But guess what? The bootcamp is not for everyone. If you like to tinker with invention ideas occasionally on weekends, hoping that someday someone will buy your idea, the Inventors Bootcamp is not for you. If you think it's your job to just come up with ideas and someone else can take care of the rest, prototypes, packaging, and contacting companies, the Inventors Bootcamp is not for you. But if inventing really matters to you, if you know deep in your heart that you've got an invention ripe for success, if you're willing to learn and do whatever it takes to be successful, I'm here to help you, and the Inventors Bootcamp is your ticket, your next logical step forward. So, what is it? When is it? And how do you sign up? The Inventors Bootcamp is 5 days of live interactive Zoom meetings. Monday, January 6th through Friday, January 10th, for 1 hour each night. Teaches you precisely how to create a clear, concise marketing message, which is exactly what companies want to hear. When you join us, you'll meet other inventors, plus you get a licensing masterclass, and lots more. The next Inventors Bootcamp starts very soon. Monday, January 6th. Enrollment is open now. Just go to www.alanbeckley.com/bootcamp. Many podcast listeners, just like you, have joined the Inventors Bootcamp. Here are just a few of our success stories. Duncan Ashworth has 2 companies interested in licensing his COVID-killing floor sanitizing invention. Daryl Carter secured a business partner and licensing arrangement. His asthma relief product debuts this fall. And Julietta Hughes tested her portrait artist invention. Now she's got a clear strategy for reaching out to companies to license it. Ready to add your success story to our list? The bootcamp is your ticket. Register now at www.alanbeckley.com/bootcamp to save your seat in the January bootcamp. Welcome to episode number 469. Today, I interview, once again, Cole Rosentreter. Cole Rosentreter grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. After 9/11, Cole felt a calling to service and enlisted in the Canadian Army, where he was a paratrooper. He deployed all over the world for 15 years, and in the process, learned a great deal about tactical use of technology in aviation. Returning home from the military to Western Canada, he was surprised to learn that the state-of-the-art in fighting wildfires comprised lookouts on towers, binoculars, and pilots using paper maps. He saw a need for more effective solutions. So in 2018, he founded Pegasus Imagery to develop intelligence-driven solutions capable of transforming complex challenges like wildfire management. Today, as CEO of Pegasus, he drives strategic direction and product roadmap for an aerospace technology company that deploys sophisticated drones and other aerial assets using real-time imagery to guide mitigation and containment of wildfires and other natural disasters. Cole is a graduate of Draper University, a 2020 NASA iTech semifinalist, and a 2021 Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year finalist. Since our second interview with Cole, Pegasus technology continues to improve. Their Midas technology addresses critical icing on wing surfaces and is now being used by Boeing for their Chinook helicopters in Canada, as well as for Pegasus drones or firefighting. You'll want to listen to this entire interview where Cole shares with us how search and rescue programs now have more options with Midas technology, allowing their aircraft to fly more often than previously. Also, how the economic impact of wildfires at $1 trillion annually now exceeds the U.S. defense budget. And finally, why quantum computing is beginning to become stable in 2025, offering a boost in growth and capabilities for many industries. Now let's get right to our interview with Cole Rosentreter. Cole Rosentreter, it's a pleasure to have you back on the podcast with us again today.
Alan, great to reconnect.
Absolutely. So when we last spoke, this is a bit over a year ago in August of 2023, your company, Pegasus Imagery, was deploying drones in Canada, the US, and elsewhere to provide real-time imagery in often dangerous environments, particularly for fighting wildfires. But in that episode, you shared with our listeners how wildfires in Western Canada in particular were growing in number, ferocity, and intensity. Through your company, Pegasus Imagery, you deploy sophisticated drones providing real-time imagery that use cutting-edge technology to improve response to wildfires and other natural disasters. For those who missed the last episode, you may wish to pause this episode, then go back and listen to number 326 first to get all the details. But to the current, I'm very excited to catch up with you and learn how things have progressed and evolved in the last, almost a year and a half since we talked. And in that last episode, you shared how Pegasus was deploying VTOL UAS aircraft, or vertical takeoff and landing unmanned aerial system, called EOS, to provide real-time imagery for wildfires. But you've since evolved your technology service offerings to include Midas, an early detection and warning system for ice formation on wings and other critical aircraft structures. So can you share with our listeners a bit more about Midas? For example, why is ice formation a risk on aircraft? And how is Midas an improvement compared to conventional methods used for this? Could you share that with our listeners?
Yeah. What I'll do is I'll start with framing this. Everybody at some point has been involved in or has been touched by aviation, whether it's getting overnight packages delivered from a really complicated logistics chain that uses DHL and big cargo aircraft. It's all the way to, people getting their own pilot's license or doing it for a living. One of the biggest challenges that we found was developing this autonomous aircraft over the last 6 years has been, we have to automate all of the actual steps that human pilots do. So we talked previously last year and a half about some of the technology that we put in place around that, but Midas, which is an acronym for this moisture and icing detection alert system, we developed that basically in-house to solve our own pain point, because without a human pilot on board a drone, by default, to look out the window, so to speak, and see icing form, you can't fly into forecasted icing conditions. And the reason why is some aircraft, like if you go through an airport or you take a commercial flight, you'll see planes often get sprayed with one or two different chemicals before they take off. This is a safety precaution, and it's being over safe when it comes to the risks around icing formation, especially on takeoff. Even a small amount of icing, several millimeters potentially, is enough to cause an aircraft to lose lift over the wing or the control surface. And as you can imagine, losing lift means you lose a lot of create a whole host of different problems. So for us, we solved this for ourselves. And what we can talk about publicly is about 4 years ago, we ended up meeting the Boeing company through a program. And then they immediately latched on to some of the technology that we developed in-house. And this Midas system has now gone through several different iterations with us and our partners over at Boeing. And publicly, we had a great press announcement to start this year in February with Boeing Defense and Boeing Canada about how the Canadian Chinook helicopter fleet is now flying with our sensors. What this allows these aircraft to do, these air crews, is to be able to fly into conditions that otherwise they wouldn't have felt comfortable or even been authorized to enter. So they may have had a mission scrubbed, but based on the forecast, but now they can actually go and fly into potentially forecasted icing conditions. And if they do experience it, now they have basically a sensor system that covers all the critical surfaces on their aircraft. And essentially it's like a second skin that tells the pilot that this is exactly where you're having icing form. And this is in future versions, how fast that icing is building up. So the alternative is pilots look out the window or they look at the forecast and they don't fly. And for search and rescue or military applications, you can imagine that the drive to launch on a mission is high because lives are on the line. So we see this as a really awesome spin out technology for the company.
2 weeks ago, I shared with you that the folks at Magic Mind had reached out to me offering a 7-day challenge to try their mental performance shots for 7 days in a row to see if I noticed benefits in my mental performance. Well, I did. From my very first morning, when I put a shot in my coffee, I noticed my focus and creativity improved, helping me while writing chapters in my first novel. Well, now, 2 weeks on, I continue to get the same benefits. No writer's block. I'm in the zone each day. Great for invention ideas, too. I love my Magic Mind shots, and I completely stand behind them, or I wouldn't share them with you, my loyal podcast listeners. Here's the good news. My friends at Magic Mind have given me a special discount just for you, my podcast listeners. You have a limited offer you can use now that gets you up to 48% off your first subscription or 20% off one-time purchases with the code AlanB20 at checkout. You can claim it now at magicmind.com/AlanB20. Give Magic Mind a try. Claim your discount and let me know what you think. I think your experience with this tasty green elixir will be just as magic as mine. Once more, just go to magicmind.com/AlanB20 and get yours now. Thank you so much for sharing that. And there's several points I'd like to share with our audience. And one of them, as you were discussing, even a few millimeters of icing building up on an airfoil can cause it to lose lift. So might you explain to our listeners who maybe aren't real technically oriented, what is it that causes that with regards to the shape of the airfoil that can cause it to lose lift?
Good question. Whether it's a helicopter rotor blade or it's the wings of an airplane, you have an airfoil or a shape. The air goes below and above the wing as it gets separated. And the issue that forms is when icing begins to form, what it does is it creates all kinds of complications for that air. Essentially, the air is no longer flowing smoothly over top of the wing or the airfoil. And then that causes a loss of efficiency, which leads to a loss of lift in most cases. The biggest, probably scariest thing about icing, though, Alan, that we've learned over the last several years is it's insidious. Like it's extremely hard to forecast and really determine where it is, especially when you're talking about conditions that are below 10,000 feet, where the air isn't really very clear and it starts to thin out, like where commercial aircraft fly. What you run into is even sometimes on a clear day in the fall, you could experience icing conditions because it's not just about being -5. It's about a series of different conditions. So the insidious onset of icing is often one of the main reasons why pilots don't fly. They'll look out and they'll say, I'm not going to risk it, because they won't be able to actually detect or visually observe icing formation often until it's too late. And just because such a small little film of icing can have such a big impact on it.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense. And I think you'd made a point earlier that if you look at the traditional view in airports where they automatically spray down the aircraft, et cetera, a lot of detection of icing, I believe, is visually based. In other words, they can look out and see the wings and see that they've got ice forming on the wings, and then they can address it. But in UAS, there's no pilot in there to look at the wings once it's airborne to observe whether or not ice is forming or not forming. Would that be accurate?
That's exactly right. Now, there are sensors out there. So obviously this is like a well-known problem ever since the first powered flight in 1903. So now we're talking about there's some solutions that are already in the market. The big differentiator is that a lot of these are like approximate measurements. So they're doing some type of relative measurement, like the sensor is being installed here, but we believe that this is a relative measurement. It's fairly accurate enough to tell us what's happening on a different surface, like a rotor blade, for example. But ours is different. So it's more of like a second skin that gets peeled and patched or directly installed onto that surface. And then this way, you're essentially connected directly into everything that surface actually, for lack of a better word, experiences or feels.
If I understand it, it's actually like spraying a very thin layer, almost like a layer of paint or something like that on the surface. And that thin layer can detect the ice in a way that couldn't have been done before. Is that true?
Really close. So it's more of a peel and patch, like putting a sticker on something. So if you think about something that's about 2 business cards in length, that's basically what we're talking about. So there's a wireless version that you can peel and patch onto any surface and then network those all together through Bluetooth or a different radio module. Then there's a direct wired one where we plug it directly into the aircraft.
Well, that's amazing. And it sounds like the end result is that it's a more sophisticated way of detecting icing and being able to address it.
It's definitely a novel approach to the technology, but what we're like, rather than making something really exquisite, our primary driver has been about getting really good feedback from pilots, UAS operators that, hey, like, what are the critical features that people want? That is actually the most important thing. If we can make it as simple as possible, which we always try to do, to make sure that we can solve whatever the level of quality required is, that's what we do. But we're very proud, I think, of the capabilities that we've been able to give some of our customers.
Well, I wanted to speak to another element that I believe we may have mentioned last time, but once again, your company, Pegasus Imagery, you do provide time critical imagery and data to first line responders in high risk situations. But a critical element of this is to allow autonomous aircraft to operate safely, avoiding collision with other aircraft around wildfires and other airspaces. And your A3S autonomy airspace awareness system is a critical element for assuring safe operations of your aircraft. Of course, these are outside of line of sight, so there's not a person to validate whether there's a problem there. Can you share with our listeners what are the key elements of the A3S basically, and how does it work? And also, does it have application in other aviation environments outside of wildfires?
For one, it's upfront, the applications are extremely wide. The reason why we're driving and really have been focused around for the last 6 years since we launched the company around wildfire is this is $1 trillion a year problem just in North America. In the United States in 2023, we had a record wildfire season in Canada as well as south of the border. And so what you look at here is there's the defense budget, which is $800 billion plus per year. And then you have the total cost for wildfire, from loss of real estate value to health effects to direct dollars spent, rebuilding destroyed towns, infrastructure. It's bigger than defense. And it happens every year on a repeatable cycle. And that cycle is only getting worse. So we look at this as really the core mission of the company for the last 6 years has been develop these aircraft so that they can safely fly beyond visual line of sight. So don't fly 2 miles, fly 20 miles, be able to fly out and provide autonomous data collection over top of fires while they're still small enough to have firefighters or air tankers or helicopters be able to effectively put them out and be able to provide real-time data, just like what we saw when we're in the military, to people on the ground to solve the problem. But the key challenge here is how do we actually fly in the national airspace system? So that's where A3S comes in. It's essentially an onboard system that isn't reliant on any other external factors. So there's no ground-based radar system, or there's no software or data or surveillance as a service, low altitude traffic management requirements. Essentially, the system is a standalone. So in the same way you would have like an F-16 fly out alone and unafraid to go and look for or go complete a mission. That's how we developed A3S. So we use onboard air-to-air radar, computer vision, different types of other sensors that can detect commercial aircrafts in the area. And all of this is basically to give the aircraft the ability to have complete situational awareness without being reliant on that Cessna pilot or that drone operator having, a radio that they're listening to on the right frequency, that type of thing like that. So we're building it to basically be, trust no one, but make sure you have make sure you have the ability to make your own decisions as you're en route.
Thanks again for clarifying that. As you were describing the A3S, I was visualizing we're so used to the human eyes being able to detect things readily, et cetera, but to replace that electronically with something else when there's no person, so to speak, in the interface is a pretty complicated situation from what I could gather. And to make sure that it's, to use the term, fully robust and will really avoid other aircraft and really ensure the safety so that these aircraft can be flown, as they say, way out of line of sight, which historically was a problem with drones.
It is exactly accurate. And I'll use a recent example that's in the news. If you look at all these mysterious drones that are flying around on the eastern seaboard, well, they're all over, but primarily in the news, it's around the eastern seaboard, like New Jersey, for example. Those drones are what you would call non-cooperative aircraft, as in they're not demonstrating something hostile, like they're not attacking something, but they're not cooperative, like they're not actively communicating with others, like air traffic controls or remote traffic management, and they're not broadcasting their position. So what we have is a bunch of visual observers on the ground looking up every night or during the daytime to try and spot them. And then they're relaying that information through social media or calling the SAA or the local state troopers. That is a good example of a non-cooperative problem set. You have commercial aircraft flying in and out of major airports on the eastern seaboard that are being impacted by this because if they're not broadcasting, there's no real way to actually see where they are. Our system has been developed to basically solve this non-cooperative challenge around if our drone is out flying and we go from, for lack of a better term, we go from 5 bars to 1 bar on the connection. We don't want the decision making for that drone to be delayed or buffered as we're trying to reestablish a better connection from the communications link. We want the drone to make its own decisions. So it's solving both the detection challenge around air-to-air radar is really good at picking up other things that are flying around. Computer vision and other different systems help support that closer in, at like a shorter range. But then the drone itself can make its own decisions on, okay, following the rules of the air in the National Airspace System, I'm going to climb or I will turn right and go around. So our drones, for lack of a better word, have been developed to be able to fly into complex challenges like what's happening in New Jersey, with the caveat, of course, that if they don't have a defensive system to protect them from being beamed up by an alien or being shot down by some foreign adversary, if that's where the origin of these New Jersey drones are coming from. But it's probably a good example of the complexity of the airspace challenge that everyone is looking at right now to try and usher in the adoption of drones.
I think the key point here is cooperative. In other words, your drones, somebody knows where they're at, and that would be you. They know what their situational awareness is, what's around them from a safety perspective. And so you don't have this unknown factor of where these things come from, who's flying them, and they're flying into places like commercial aircraft spaces and things like this, where they're creating a hazard and a danger. And yours would never do any of those things.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Great point there. Just one more point I wanted to touch on just real quickly, and then we'll move to another question. And that is, you had mentioned that the deal you worked with Boeing on the Chinook helicopters, that would be a different application then also, correct?
It is. So it's taking the technology that we solved for ourselves around having a drone that can detect icing itself, like if it begins to form on, say, the wings or the tail, and then taking that and then porting it over to a manned aviation application.
That sounds great.
Especially coming from the military. I spent 15 years in the infantry. The Chinook is a big, heavy platform. It can do pretty much everything you need as far as carrying equipment and 40 troops in the back. So it's also a very strong, reliable platform that can handle flying into some different forms of icing conditions. So it's a great testbed platform for us as our kind of first military aviation platform for this technology.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Let me ask you, so what's next for Pegasus? Do you have any new products in the pipeline that you can speak about, or what do you think the next 6 months to a year is going to look like for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. From what 2025 will have in store for us, I think is going to be extremely hard for any company to try and handle, which is quantum computing just became stable That was announced in like the last week from Google. That's a huge change. Whether or not that happens or commercializes in the next few years, but you look at the pace of AI and all the different software and autonomous agents and tooling. I start with that because on our side, humans are the most important piece of the company, right? So the team is obviously the center of all that. I think 2025 for the company is going to be continuing to try and find ways to improve and grow our team. And then where we see ourselves from the business standpoint is really we've done the bullseye target where did it hit, did it work? And we're seeing a lot of really good feedback and a lot of building success with the Chinook program. We're obviously engaged in a number of different aircraft platforms and different OEMs that we're working through as well to get this technology expanded. And we're really looking at the commercial applications as well for it. So on the drone side, 2025, this summer will be where Part 108 in the US comes out. So essentially the new in-force regulations for how harmonized airspace between manned aircraft and uncrewed aircraft and autonomous aircraft will all work together will be rolled out. And it'll be the same thing in Canada, and then the EASA in Europe later on as a trailing follower for that. So it's an exciting time. We're laser focused on solving some of these big challenges when it comes to how can we essentially go from proof of concept, which we've done, to proof of life, to MVP, to okay, now we have product market fit. So 2025 in a nutshell, it will be focused around product market fit for us for the icing detection system primarily.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I guess you talked about the Part 108 regulations coming out related to manned and UAS type aircraft. And this has moved so quickly that the regulations are just now beginning to catch up with the reality of what's going on, if that's accurate.
The regulations have been trying to catch up for 20 years. So it'll be an overnight surprise for everyone. 20 years in the making when these new regulations become into force later this summer.
And I also wanted to highlight real quick, a great point you made earlier, and I just didn't highlight that, but it puts it so much in perspective to recognize that the wildfires annually are $1 trillion problem, and that exceeds the U.S. military budget every year. So that really puts it in perspective as to how big a problem it really is all by itself.
The only thing I would add to that is putting it in context around the military. Think about it like this. The United States is ahead of Canada when it comes to having like a professionalized wildfire management agency that can then coordinate between different states and pull different resources, joint training and coordination through FEMA to make sure people have the right emergency management, commonality for training and equipment. But the ground force, the wildland firefighters, these hotshot teams and firefighters, they're either retiring or they're moving on, no matter how much they love the job, because there's just some serious bottlenecks. So I don't think wildfire has gotten the attention that it deserves, especially when it comes to the firefighters and the boots on the ground, which are the only way that the fires are actually able to be completely extinguished. So there's a big risk in the next few years around having a critical gap when it comes to manpower on the wildfire side. So unlike, I guess it's like the military going from like an all volunteer professional full-time force to how the Romans did it, where they would have a problem and then they would go around and call up all the farmers or all the landowners to come and grab your shield and sword. And they do it as not even part-time. It's a huge risk. On the other side to it, from the aviation side, there's a company based just outside of Calgary, Alberta in Western Canada called de Havilland. And they have orders for, I think, about just over 20 of their new Super Scooper air tankers. All of these orders are for Europe. None right now currently are for North America. So the aviation support isn't going to get bigger. So there's no increase in the water bomber force. And there's a real critical risk on losing, the overall total headcount, like wildland firefighters. It's a big problem. So a lot more focus needs to be put on it and really putting resources to it so it doesn't cost $1 trillion a year or more.
Thank you so much for that. Well, my final question, Cole, is how can our listeners reach you if they have other questions?
So first, we're on social media. So you can find us on flypegasus.ai on the web. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn primarily. And then we also have a Facebook page. So feel free to reach out and directly connect with us through there.
And Pegasus is Pegasus, right?
That's right.
And so would they find you also like flypegasus.ai or what would be the website again?
So our website is flypegasus.ai, FLYPEGASUS.ai.
Perfect. Thank you. I always like to make it where people can easily find it and get to it. Once again, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us again. It's always fascinating to talk to you and find out what's going on in this space. And once again, another 6 months or a year, I'd like to have the same opportunity to get back in touch and see what you've got going on at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Alan, thanks for inviting me back.
Of course. So you're done searching for your product and it's not out there. Yay! Maybe you filed for a provisional patent and done some marketing research or surveys. Heck, maybe you've even created a rough prototype, then found that, although it kind of works, it looks like something from the Stone Age. You'd be embarrassed to show it to your friends, much less to a manufacturer for a licensing pitch. What if I could put you in touch with a guy who offers free consultations, takes no money down, no money up front, and will give you a quote on your project before he starts? What if I told you that this same guy can help you design your product and make you a virtual prototype before you ever put a penny into building a physical one? What if I told you he could make you patent drawings, CAD files for manufacturing, and even make marketing videos and build you a website? If this sounds like someone you want to talk to, let me introduce you to my first podcast sponsor, Brian Keast at I Draw Dreams for Inventors. With 3.5 years of trade school and 15 years of mechanical experience working as a mechanic for General Motors, you have someone that's seen countless design failures and how they were fixed. Also, he had a 25-year career as a general contractor who designed his own houses and remodels on computer-aided design. In getting plans through countless building departments, he gained a tremendous amount of experience by working directly with structural engineers. The many years of combined experience in these two careers gave him a unique look into stresses and failures in design. He brings this wealth of knowledge and experience to his company, I Draw Dreams, as the CAD guy who will design a product for you that will work. Every inventor I've referred to Brian has come away delighted with the work he has done for them, and I think you will too. Just make sure to tell them that Alan sent you. Thanks so much for tuning in to Inventors Helping Inventors. If you like the show, please tell your friends about it. Make sure to subscribe in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts so you won't miss a single episode. Talk to you soon.